assignment we are going to begin today. It's called Controversy Analysis Paper. And it is a 1250 to 1500 words essay comprising history and current status of a public controversy according to strict outline, having 10 sources minimum with annotated bibliography. Here are the details about it. We are going to go over the details. Through those details, I will be telling you how to write this assignment. Okay. Now, 10% marks, this is the word limit, double space, 12 point times New Roman, APA format. The purpose. The purpose of this essay is to demonstrate your expertise and understanding of the controversy, not to take a stand. You're only a reporter for this paper, stating the information of your controversy. So you know what is role of a reporter. Okay, there are reporters working with various uh, media channels, right? So their job is to describe what they see. Okay, they can't add anything, or they cannot add much from their own side. Okay, they only have to describe objectively what they see happening at a particular spot. That is exactly what you are going to do. In this essay, you are going to describe, of course, in your own words, but you're going to describe the details of the controversy on the topic on which you wrote your topic proposal. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
So in further details, you have to write an essay explaining the history and current status of your public controversy. Your essay should include following. So you might notice this expression over here, public controversy. Okay, that is something we kept in mind right from the beginning, that the topic that you choose, it should have some social presence. Okay, people should be aware of that topic. Only then that topic can be treated as a controversy. Now you have to write the history and current status of that. We will understand these 2 points in more detail later today. So the first part of your essay is an introduction with a clearly stated thesis and preview statement. Now the thesis that you will have in the introduction of your essay, that will be more like a preview statement. So what is a thesis or a preview statement? It is a statement which gives a focus to your essay. For example, if you wish to write your topic on the controversy surrounding 18th Amendment in Pakistan, then your thesis statement can be that this paper introduces the history and current status of the controversy surrounding 18th Amendment in Pakistan. Right? Now this statement seems to be very obvious and simple statement, but this statement is very important in the sense that this statement, as the first statement in your essay, will give a direction to the rest of the essay that you are going to write. It will give a focus to what you will write. Also, your reader will clearly understand what the reader should expect in the rest of the essay. The second part of your essay is, in fact, a number of paragraphs, coherent paragraphs in logical order that detail the history, current status, and language of the controversy. So the first thing, coherent paragraphs. What kind of paragraphs are coherent paragraphs? Coherent paragraphs are the ones which are well structured. What kind of paragraph is a well-structured paragraph? A well-structured paragraph is one which has a topic sentence in it, which has supporting details for that topic sentence, and that which has a concluding statement as well. That kind of paragraph is called well-structured paragraph or coherent paragraph. Now, all the paragraphs in your essay should be coherent. Now, all the paragraphs should also be arranged in a logical order. What kind of order is logical order between the paragraphs? By logical order, we mean that there should be a thoughtful sequence between the paragraphs. For example, you might choose to write two paragraphs about the history of the controversy. When you do that, you might decide that when you write those two paragraphs about the history of that controversy, then you move from one paragraph to the second paragraph in a chronological manner, which is the point about the history which comes before, the paragraph about that is written before. And the point in history which comes later in history, the paragraph about that point also comes later. For example, if you are writing your paper about 18th Amendment and you are describing the history of 18th Amendment, you are describing the history of the controversy related to 18th Amendment, then of course, uh, for this example, you are writing two paragraphs about it, okay? So you might notice when you review literature related to the history of the controversy of 18th Amendment, when you review that literature, when you read that literature, or when you read those books of history, you come to realize that the first controversy rose in an assembly session, in a parliament session, which took place, say, in 2016, while the second controversy rose in in a in a Senate meeting, which took place in 2020, right? Now you have these 2 points to write in the history of the controversy related to 18th Amendment. According to the logical order, your first paragraph should deal with the controversy, the controversial point which was raised in the assembly session of 2016. And your second point should describe that point which was raised in a Senate meeting in 2020. This is called logical order. This is a chronological order according to the historical development. The most uh, logical order that you can have for this paper that you are writing is in fact the chronological order, right? Because it is analysis of the controversy. You should start from the most initial stage of the controversy and then keep moving from point to point until the most recent development. Now, through the coherent paragraphs arranged in a logical order, you are going to write the detail about the history, the current status, and language of the controversy. There is more detail about these 3 points coming up, right? I'll discuss these 3 points in more detail later. And then the third part of your essay is a brief conclusion. In the brief conclusion, you sum up the whole discussion that you had earlier. You should attach an annotated bibliography with a minimum of 10 sources. So in fact, most of you, well, I think all of you already have these 10 sources with you. You can attach that with this assignment. But if while writing this assignment, you realize that you used any additional material, you can add that material to this list as well. Similarly, if you feel that you dropped some material from the listed sources and you did not use any one or two particular sources from the list, then you should remove those sources from the list that you attach with the assignment. Any questions so far?
Yes, sir.
What is the question?
Sir, if we don't use any of the source of annotated bibliography which we sent to you, so it's okay then?
Well, all of them, that means you are changing the topic probably.
No, sir, not changing the topic, but using additional resources as well.
Yeah, additional is fine. You add all of them to the list.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Okay, any other question? All right. So please note this important point. The thesis that you mentioned in the introduction over here, this thesis is not your opinion on the issue. It is simply a statement that encompasses the purpose of this paper. You want to give a purpose to yourself and to the reader for writing this particular paper. So do not take a stand. For example, do not say in the thesis that 18th Amendment promises more provincial autonomy to the provinces in Pakistan. This kind of statement that I just told you is an opinion about 18th Amendment. This cannot be the thesis of your controversy analysis paper. Instead, you should say in the thesis statement of controversy analysis paper that this paper deals with the controversy raised by the approval of or the sanction of or the passage of 18th Amendment in Pakistan. You can give little more details as well in terms of date and year when it was approved, right? So it is a statement that encompasses the purpose of this paper. Now we move on to the essay organization. So your essay should be organized around these three areas. The first area is history of controversy. And now I would explain the points which I did not explain over here. History, status, and language of the controversy. Now this is how we organize the essay. First of all, we deal with the history of controversy. Now, in the history of controversy, you study and report the relevant history. The following questions will help you to write this part of your essay. The first question is, where did this controversy come from? Person, year, legislation, etc. So please remember that controversies do not exist in vacuum. The controversies are either written somewhere in books, or they are recorded in lectures, or they are written in form of newspaper articles. So where did this controversy come from? That means identify a particular conference, a particular meeting, a particular research paper, a particular book, or a particular legislation, or a particular speech by somebody which created that controversy. Now, you cannot guess on the origin of the controversy. You need to conduct research for that. You need to read the material to explore where this controversy began, where the controversy about this particular issue began. So the first question to respond to under this part of your paper is, what is the source of this controversy, where this controversy began from? The second question, now, of course, when you will address this question, where did this controversy come from? Naturally, you will be starting with the history of the controversy, because that will be the most initial stage of that particular controversy that you will be pointing out. And that is how history is always written, okay? History is written from point 1 to point 10, like from the initial point to the end point, right? So when you identify where or when the controversy began, naturally you are giving the beginning of the history of that particular issue. Additionally, respond to this question: what are the historical circumstances and key moments in the development of this controversy? Now, this answering this question will help you to explain the history of the controversy as well. So, what were the specific historical circumstances because of which that controversy rose? Or what were the key moments in the development of this particular history? So, a topic like that famous, uh, feminist movement, so-called feminist movement in Pakistan, Aurat March. I don't know how many of you know about that, but I'm sure those who read newspaper, they are aware of it. That Aurat March is considered to be, uh, a phenomenon which is highly controversial. Okay. So, what are the historical circumstances which produced the controversy related to that particular uh, issue? Again, you cannot guess on them. You really need to see what was the first year when this march started. Once you pin that year down, then you need to find the newspapers of those years, of that particular day, a day before or day after, where Aurat March has been discussed by editorials, by experts, by writers, by historians, whosoever. And see what do they say about Aurat March. Did the articles written in a particular newspaper in Pakistan a day after the first Aurat March, did they raise any point of controversy there and then? If yes, then that is your source. Well, what do they say? What do they point at in terms of what is controversial in that march? They might point out the posters, they might point out any activity in the Aurat March, so on and so forth. So, historical circumstances. Where does the history come from? History comes from the published work, right? So you need to trace that work, that article, that book chapter, or whatever, something published. It could be a published lecture too, a lecture published on YouTube. All right. But remember, it should be an authentic source. Do not use random blogs. Okay. If you're using a blog or a web page, it should have been, the information on that should have been provided by an expert, a historian, an academic, or by an organization which is well known. Similarly, there could be key moments in the development of a particular controversy as well. Like for 18th Amendment, initially people might have agreed on the amendments. Definitely people agreed on the amendment. That is how it was passed. But then what happened? How the controversy began? Once you have pointed that out, now what are the key moments in the development of this controversy? Maybe one moment could be where, various, organizations which used to be national, like Higher Education Commission, they were broken into, four parts, depending upon their provincial offices. And when they were dissolved into, four sub offices, people pointed out that this could make possible more nepotism and more corruption, because the office which used to be like higher education commission, which used to be too far away from the crowded cities and crowded provinces, and used to act kind of in so-called independence, will be subjected to regional and provincial bureaucracy, right? And that will produce uh, more corruption in these institutions. And then people started pointing out, well, this is the after effect of the 18th Amendment. All right. So I'm not expert on what I'm saying, students. I'm just giving you an example. Okay. So so then people pointed out that it is directly connected with 18th Amendment, right? So then this is another movement in the controversy related to 18th Amendment. Okay. Once again, you cannot say it just from your own mind. You need to have a resource where you read all this. Okay. And then you provide that information in your essay based upon your own reading. Of course, you will need a citation for that, which we will also discuss later on. Okay. But this is how you will trace the key moments in the development of this controversy. Who are the key players? That is the next question to respond. By key player, we mean the people or the groups or the organizations who either influence this controversy or who are influenced by this controversy. These are the stakeholders in the controversy. So 18th Amendment, for example, the key players could be two political parties or maybe three political parties. All right. It could be, the parliamentarians, certain parliamentarians who played more active role, who played more active role than other parliamentarians. There could be, I pointed at the groups, right, which is parties, political parties themselves. Once you understand and describe who are the key players, the controversy becomes a little more clear to the reader. So if you can name the political parties, that these are the parties who played their role in passing this particular amendment, then you can also point out what interest they could have in this kind of amendment. It can apply to other topics as well, right? This is just an example topic. And then additionally, what are their views and perspectives? Okay, because you realized and your research told you that the controversy rose because of the role played by these key players in this particular controversy. For example, the controversy surrounding the Aurat March, we know the kind of key players which were there, right? So there were some individuals who were more patriarchal in their approach, and they wanted the society to be, or they want the society to be more conventional with fixed gender roles, right? So those kind of individuals are key players in the controversy. But then there are other key players as well who who believe that in the current situation, women do not have their rights to their full extent, and they experience the situation of domestic violence and oppression and things like that. Okay, so there are certain NGOs and groups and individuals as well, of course, who stand for the women rights and who want the issue of women rights to be highlighted through this Aurat March. Again, there are names associated with that. You need to trace those names. Okay, these are the individuals, right? So once you name those individuals, you can better explain the development of that particular controversy. All right. And you can also, if you describe their viewpoints, then the reader can easily understand why the controversy is rising. Right? Reader might notice that these key players in this particular controversy have contradictory views about this issue. And that has raised the friction and hence the controversy. All right. So this is about history of the controversy. Any questions about that? Okay. If no questions, let's proceed to the second part.
What I'm offering is an extra contribution. You have a little bit of this stuff.
Now, the second part of your essay is status quo. Most of you know that status quo means the current situation or the current condition. In the status quo part of your controversy analysis paper, you will describe how that controversy is being treated today, these days. Answer the following question. What are things now with respect to the law, public opinion, and social norms with reference to that particular controversy? So, you know, the controversy, any topic related to a controversy or with the controversy that you are dealing with, it connects with law or public opinion or social norms or many other things as well. So how that controversy is being treated these days, how people view that controversy today. For example, if you are working on war of independence, suppose, and you have highlighted that the controversy in that war is this, that pro-Indian historians view that war as a war of independence, while pro-Britain historians view that war as a mutiny. And that has raised the controversy about what to name this war. Now, after describing the whole history of that, you come down to the status quo part of your essay. Now, in the status quo, you have to describe how historians view this controversy today, how writers view that controversy today. Again, you can describe the status quo only through the published work which is available to you. You cannot guess on that. So you need to read an article maybe which has been published in the last 1 year or so, on the anniversary of War of Independence. Articles are written in many newspapers. People write articles about the War of Independence. Okay, so you might get hold of a couple of articles into different newspapers and see what people say about that controversy today. You might figure out that the controversy related to War of Independence now is almost settled, because historians seem to agree on the fact that War of Independence in fact was a war of independence, because the British rule on the subcontinent was not legitimate. Okay, so I'm just giving you an example. It depends what you find in literature, right? But of course, it won't be one line. You need to describe it with reference to a couple of points, how that particular controversy is being treated today. Similarly, if somebody is working on women rights, suppose, and you have come across some controversy related to women rights with special reference to Pakistan, okay, where some people uphold patriarchy, the male dominance as a right way of, uh, you know, establishing a society. But other people believe that women should have equal rights. Okay. So therefore, the controversy. Okay. So you might trace the history first and you might realize that the controversy about that starts somewhere. Okay. I don't know where. It depends upon your research. Maybe you figure out it starts from Aurat March. Okay. Because it is only from Aurat March onwards that people explicitly started writing about that and started giving talks and lectures about that. That is when controversy seems to have started. Okay, so when you trace the history and you reach down to the status quo point, you might figure out that the current situation of the controversy is this, that women rights have actually been largely acknowledged, not only in our society, but also law has given protection, because certain bills of women rights, they have been acknowledged and they have been approved, passed by even the parliament as well, and therefore we have quite a number of laws which are in practice to protect, for example, to protect women at the workplace. And in fact, there is a legal punishment for violating that particular law, right? So you might point out, related to this controversy, that in current situation there is a legal protection available for women and their rights. Therefore, uh, the controversy to this extent has been resolved. Okay, but then you might also inform the reader that there are other ways where the controversy is still there. Okay, and you can point that out. But whatever the current situation is, you have to describe that based upon the literature and the resources and the articles and the chapters and the lectures that you are consulting. So the status quo should make up the bulk of your essay. Identify and describe how different groups of people are arguing about the controversy. All right. So one rule of thumb is this, that in order to write about the status quo of a particular controversy, you consult the recent resources, the resources which have been published in a couple of years. So what are people arguing about that controversy these days? What do people say about these issues in their lectures, in their talks, in their articles published in newspapers, or in their essays published in different magazines, or in the chapters which they publish in books, or in the books which they publish? Additionally, what types of persuasive claims are they making? Claim of definition, claim of fact, claim of value, or claim of policy? Now, students, just for this point, I will explain this point in the next class. What is this? But for the time being, we only understand this, that in order to describe the status quo, you need to describe what kind of discussion people are still having about that particular controversy, and to what extent that controversy has been either resolved or it is still active, or maybe it is even more active. And when you discuss this second point, to what extent that controversy is active or not active, you can refer to, for example, law or the public opinion. You can see if that controversy still exists in the legal circles, or if this controversy still exists in the public opinion, or if this controversy still exists in our society in our social norms. Okay. Again, you will familiarize yourself with that by reading your articles related to the law matters of that controversy, or public opinion of that controversy, or social norms of that controversy. And then finally, related to the same point, what are people saying about your controversy and how they say it? By people, we mean the writers or the speakers, experts. The last part of your essay is language of controversy. So by language, we mean terms, the terminology, the vocabulary. So master the language of controversy and then show your mastery by mentioning those terms and describing them for the reader. So when you reach this part of your essay, basically you can start describing what are the major issues related to that particular controversy, and in those major issues you will naturally be covering the relevant vocabulary. Let me give you an example. Again, 18th Amendment. Okay, it is a controversy. All right. So what is the language of this controversy? By language of controversy, we mean what vocabulary do we use in order to debate this controversy, right? So we use vocabulary like this: prosecution, legislation, okay, not prosecution but legislation, or provincial autonomy, or federation, all right, uh, or you know uh, things like that. Okay, so the term like federation, even if its meaning seems to be obvious, but with reference to 18th Amendment, the term federation has a very special meaning. What is that? Similarly, we know what is provincial autonomy, but with reference to 18th Amendment, provincial autonomy has a very special meaning. What is that? Now, when you describe these terms, you mention these terms and you explain them a little bit. Indirectly, you will be describing a few issues related to this particular controversy. And your reader will be able to understand that you know this controversy. You are familiar with the language of this controversy. What language do we use to debate this particular controversy? You are aware of that. So you express your mastery of the language of that controversy through this part of your essay. Okay, there are 2 points, additional points that I want to make at the end. Over here, I mentioned an introduction and a brief conclusion. Okay, so remember that introduction and the conclusion, they are in addition to these 3 points, which is history of controversy, status quo, and language of controversy. Introduction comes before history of controversy, and conclusion comes after language of controversy in your essay. And when you write the introduction, of course, you have to write a thesis in that I already explained to you. But the introduction will not be just the thesis. Rather, in introduction, you should introduce the controversy, right? Because right after the introduction, you will start writing about history of the controversy. So you don't have chance to explain what the controversy is when you are on this point, history of controversy. You can describe the controversy itself in the introduction part. So when you begin like this, that this essay introduces the history and current status of the controversy created by the passage of 18th Amendment in Pakistan. After this sentence, after this thesis, you can describe, you can explain what is the controversy. So you might say in the introduction part that when this bill or this amendment was approved by the parliament, the commentators or the analysts started to argue whether in a country like Pakistan, the regional autonomy will work out or not. Therefore, some analysts believe that 18th Amendment in the long run will benefit the country, and some other argued that 18th Amendment in the long run will create more chaos. And then you can further say that created controversy about 18th Amendment, right? So this is how you introduce the topic. You haven't touched the history yet. And after this introduction, you can go on to history of controversy, answering these questions, right? So this is the point that I wanted to, mention at the end, right? If you have any question, you can ask.